Here's John Shannon, the host of 100% Hockey with Darren Millar, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada and the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, where the Wine Village is open. Hello, John.
Don't tell me the Wine Village is open.
Oh,
come on.
Of course. For May long weekend, it's got to be open. It's got to be open.
I know. I'm checking the websites. Don't worry.
Yeah. Our first opportunity to talk to you since Adam Foote was introduced as the Canucks head coach. What do you make of the decision?
Well, I think that the key thing in all of this is that there's an understanding of what has gone on with the hockey club the last 2 or 3 years with Adam. He understands the room. Obviously, his strength is with the defensive side of the game. And obviously there's some bias when it comes to Quinn Hughes. So you can try to connect the dots that way. You guys have talked about that a lot over the last couple of days. The question for me now will be a fascinating one is who's going to be brought in to help out in a simplistic way on the offensive side of the puck. And I'm not worried about special teams with Adam, but you do wonder if there's going to be somebody that gets brought in as an associate head coach per se, that helps on working with the forwards, because we obviously know that that's a priority with the hockey club. They're still trying to find a number 2, and Jeff may agree. They may even try to find a number 3 center with this hockey club. You never know. But you do need to have somebody on that coaching staff that has a strength at the forward position, and that to me is going to be the next interesting hire.
Was there a case for clean break, John? Was there a case for someone who had no attachment to the annus horribilis that was last year?
Well, I mean, if the right person is available, the answer is yes. You know what I mean? Don't get stuck in too much loyalty. You know, don't get stuck in the fact that, okay, these guys understand what's going on. If the right body's available, and you know, there was a list of people, some with NHL experience, some with no NHL experience, that head coaching experience, that is, that had some consideration. But I think Adam Foote probably fit the bill closer than anybody else to where they wanted to go. And in part of that, in saying that, leaving Manny Malhotra to hone his skill as a head coach in the American League.
You mentioned the importance of the relationship between Adam Foote and Quinn Hughes. And certainly, I mean, there's enough there with Quinn and his future that on some levels I understand it, but it is a team game. Like, is there any danger in catering to one guy, even if that one guy means the world to the hockey club?
I think the answer is yes, Jeff, but I don't see Adam doing that. That's just, I don't know Adam well. I've met him a few times. You know, he was a damn good defenseman himself. I think he understands what it's like to be a team player. When you put championship pedigree behind the bench, you're doing the right thing. Adam knows what it's like to be a team player, and I would suspect that, yes, Quinn Hughes is the number 1 defenseman, but at the same time, there are other guys on that blue line that will get some TLC from Adam and the rest of the staff.
I wonder if he and Rick Ducket are going to have to arm wrestle for assistant coaches. They're basically in the same boat, and I wonder if they travel in the same circles and would look at some of the same candidates, although Rick obviously has more head coaching experience. When you look at a guy like Adam Foote, John, who, you know, a year in Kelowna and a year that didn't go all that well in Kelowna as his only head coaching experience, do you think you have to insulate him with a guy that has had head coaching experience at the NHL level behind this bench?
Wouldn't hurt. You know, you look at what Claude Julien has done in St. Louis, coming back to be an assistant coach for Jim Montgomery. That seems to have, I think, helped the situation. You need somebody, I think, with NHL experience, comfortable in being a team player on the coaching staff. I don't have an answer of who that is, But you go around the league and you look at successful head coaches that have gone back to be assistant coaches and worked out very well. Like John Stevens comes to mind for me. A guy like that is somebody that has had a great career. Rick Bowness has been both over the years and had a fantastic career. And I'm not suggesting either guys are candidates in Vancouver, just examples. Yes, there are people out there that understand a role on being on a staff without being mentioned as, well, here's the next guy, here's the challenger for the job if Adam Foote doesn't work out. There are plenty of guys out there wanting to stay in the game because they love the game and feel that they can give back to the game. And I think the Canucks need to find somebody like that for Adam.
Do you have any idea, and I'm just throwing a name out there, do you have any idea where Gerard Gallant is these days?
Other than PEI?
Is he looking to get back in?
It's a lovely time of year in PEI.
He's definitely looking to get back in. I mean, listen, that's a great name, I think. Gerard Gallant.
Well, he coached Adam Foote in Columbus, so I just, again, you connect dots at this stage.
You never know, and was a very good, before he got his first head coaching job, was an outstanding assistant in Montreal. So from that perspective, and ironically got the job in Montreal because his name was Gallant, and they thought he could speak French. Well, Gerard can't speak French, but that's another story for another day. But Gerard Gallant's a really good example of somebody of that ilk that could certainly help the Canucks.
John, do you suspect that Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin looked around and said, do we really want to trust this to someone we don't know all that well coming off the year we just had? Do you believe that familiarity with Rutherford and Allvin very much boosted Foote's case?
Well, I think that was a big part of it, quite frankly. And more importantly, the relationship between Allvin and Foote. We all know that Rick Ducket and Adam were joined at the hip for all the time that they were both in Vancouver. So Adam was privy to a lot of those general manager conversations. And I think that in hearing everything, that to me was a big part of why Adam put himself in a position to take this job and get this job. So yes, I do think that that's important. Bringing somebody into that market, into the Vancouver market, without knowledge of what the market's all about, can be a bit of a culture shock. And I think Adam now has a pretty good feel for what it's like, understands what the demands are, understands what the dressing room is about. So I think that probably really did play a big part, a successful part of Adam's candidacy.
All right, moving on. Jim Rutherford last week saying, hey, we may not have cap space when it comes to free agency. It sounds like he's forecasting, and it sounds like another early move might be coming from a Jim Rutherford organization. What do you anticipate here? How aggressive do you think we're hearing about a trade before the end of the Stanley Cup final?
Before the Stanley Cup final, I don't see it before the playoffs are over, Matt. I do think everything revolves around the draft. And the other thing is what is the greatest asset that they're going to give up? And isn't the greatest asset that pick, Jeff? Don't you think that it's their pick, 15th pick overall is their number one asset at this point? And the only way you're going to create a bidding war is in and around the draft. So I would suggest that it might be a little premature to think something's going to happen before hockey ends, but it certainly would be plausible to think that it's going to happen in Los Angeles at the draft.
Let's ask you our Bogey Juice poll question then. Should they go after Mitch Marner, John? And how do you see the Marner situation playing out?
Well, my answer is going to be no. And Marner's such a polarizing topic in this town, let alone your town. I think you have to start asking the question about guys like Mitch, who has an outstanding regular season player. But guys, we have watched the Stanley Cup playoffs. We watch now on an annual basis the return of heavy hockey. We watched the Winnipeg St. Louis series. We watched the Dallas series. We watched everything that goes on, Vegas and Edmonton even at times. To move him to the Western Conference, to a much heavier style of hockey, I'm not sure that that's the right move. I really am not. It's a big name. It's going to cost you a lot of money. I think you can spend the money better elsewhere.
From 5 Canadian teams, we're down to just one. One that got within one win of winning the Stanley Cup last year, and there they are. But the team that beat them ultimately is still in the mix here. It's going to be fascinating to see where it goes here over the Final Four. How different is this Edmonton team, John, 1 year later, and how motivated do you think they are to get the job done?
Well, I think they're more motivated, Jeff, simply because I think they're that much older. When you look at beyond Connor and Leon, all of those forwards in their 30s, Evander Kane, Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, Corey Perry, who just turned 40. They're not going to have very many more kicks at the can of the Stanley Cup in their careers. I think that's the one thing that motivates that group. I think this team, Edmonton, is playing a much deeper quality game right now this year from a forward perspective than they did last, which has been, I think, the most impressive and surprising thing about the hockey club. If Matthias Ekholm can come back, say, middle of the next round against Dallas, that becomes a big factor. But they're playing, I think, their best hockey in a long period of time. After everybody probably, particularly after the first 2 games of the LA series, thought that this was the end of something and people were going to start telling stories about when's Connor going to get moved out of town. So I think it's actually in many ways healthier than last year and might be a better team. The only question mark, guys, is the question mark that exists every year at Edmonton, and that's what's going to happen with the goaltending. What's going to happen, right?
And I was with you. The way they limped to the finish line, and after those first 2 games, I was wondering whether we were writing off the McDavid era in Edmonton. Speaking of, though, John, and look, I know hockey is a different sport, and I know the Edmonton Oilers are a defending Western Conference champion who got to the final, and so they're the rare cup or bust team. But I couldn't help but note how dour, how pissy that post-game dressing room was after they eliminate the Vegas Golden Knights and win round 2. Now, I know the hockey guys make fun of the baseball guys popping bottles and, ski goggles after every series win. But, the fans want joy. Like, every Edmonton fan is partying after that victory. And the Oilers room, it seems like it's like a morgue. It just wasn't very good television. I'm just wondering, could the NHL do more in terms of celebrating these series victories, aligning more with their fans, and just bringing more, joy, more color, more atmosphere, better television to the Stanley Cup playoffs after these series victories?
I'm not worried what happens in the dressing room. What I see on the ice after a series ends is something that I think that every other sport is envious of. I think the concept of can make it better for television, that's not what the dressing room is all about. The dressing room is the habitat of the players. We have to respect that. I would tell you that some would say that that's a focus, and I guarantee you the first person to walk into that room and speak to his teammates was Connor McDavid before the cameras got there, and he said, "Boys, the job's not done yet. Stay focused. Be ready." Celebration on the ice is everything, and I think that let's face it, the fans got to enjoy that as much as anybody else did. So I'm not worried about what happens in the room. That to me is, I mean, we've even, we started in 2007, Matt, taking the celebration with the players out of the dressing room and putting it on the ice, simply because too many people wanted to be part of it and there's not enough room. It started, it was Brian Burke's idea in Anaheim, because that darn visiting dressing room was so small.
Yeah.
So that I'm not worried about that. When you look at the fans, when you look at what happens on the ice, when you look at some of the greatest dramatic handshakes that we've seen in a long period of time this year, I think we're doing just fine.
Yeah. Great stuff, John. Thank you for the time here this week. We will catch up next week.
Cheers, boys.